This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
The national headlines have been pretty rough recently. Between tariff battles, government layoffs, the stock market tanking, and Elon Musk waving around a chainsaw, there's plenty to worry about. And one of our highest-ranking Oregonians is in the thick of it all. As the leader of the Senate Finance Committee, U.S. Senator Ron Wyden has a front-row seat to a lot of these complex, crucial issues. So today on CityCast Portland, Senator Wyden joins us to share what he's seen unfold in Washington, D.C., and how it's affecting all of our lives back home in Oregon. It's Tuesday, March 18th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. How are you doing today?
It's been a little hectic. We had a couple of town meetings. We had 2 last night. They're really very helpful, and what they reflect is the unbelievable urgency that people have for this kind of flood the zone approach that Musk and Trump are taking. It's a very clever strategy.
Yeah. Over the last few months, you've been among one of the most outspoken Democrats protesting the Trump administration, calling it like straight out just a coup and an authoritarian takeover. Are you feeling any blowback for those bold stances right now?
Well, they're certainly not sending any holiday cards, that's for sure. But the reality is what they are doing is stomping all over the Constitution and our unique separation of powers. For example, Congress holds the power of the purse, and Elon Musk is trying to tear that up and take it over. So we had town meetings last night, Congresswoman Janelle Bynum and myself. I think there were well over 1,000 people there last night. In one of my meetings, the press said we had 3,000.
Wow. I know that there are a lot of constituents of yours, and I think they're wondering what is happening, like what you're doing, what everyone's doing, because there's a lot of talking about like, yo, this isn't right, but it doesn't feel like there's a lot of action. And what would you say to those people that are just like, when are the Democrats going to show up?
What I do is tell them about the examples. For example, I voted against this continuing resolution, which would have given Trump a tremendous amount of power during a shutdown. But here's an example. Early on, he froze federal spending. And in effect, he shut down the Medicaid portals. These are the portals in Oregon. About 1 out of 3 or 4 people is dependent on Medicaid for their health care. These portals are particularly important for seniors trying to get help with medicine and nursing homes and the like. And Trump pretended, oh, no, he wasn't going to do it. But I worked with whistleblowers from across the country, and within an hour or two, I posted, hey, these Medicaid portals are shut down. We need to come down hard on the Trump people to make it clear that this is not acceptable conduct. You don't have the power of the purse to shut those down. So the first couple hours, people started texting and tweeting. About 3 hours in, the Trump people saw what I had done, saw the mobilization, said, oh, we didn't mean to do it. We'll fix it. And the next morning, it was fixed. And Medicaid services were available just as they always are. A modest example. But the point is, when I see something that is unfair or lawless, as was the case with the Medicaid portals, I come down hard and we get it fixed.
Just last week you pushed the Senate Finance Committee chair, Mike Crapo, a chair you once held just like 2 months ago, to immediately convene a hearing to investigate the Department of Government Efficiencies, their involvement at the Social Security Administration. Have you heard anything from Senator Crapo about that? We
haven't, but we're going to continue the push because what we're talking about is a staggering set of issues that are important to the privacy of the American people. These databases, for example, for the IRS and other kinds of programs, they are really the Fort Knox of personal privacy data. And the Trump people have already lied once They said that the data had been read but not acted on. My investigators found that that was not the case. They were really trying to discourage programs that they didn't like. Now they've claimed, well, in response to this concern that I generated, they're going to make sure the data is anonymous. Well, I'm not going to take that at face value. And there's a bunch of things that could have happened in the gap between the time we caught them and the time they're making it anonymous. So I'm considered the privacy hawk of the United States Senate. But to tell you the truth, just about every senator is pretty concerned about these privacy issues. So we're going to have a lot of other hawks flying with us.
That's good to hear. Well, have you had a chance at all to talk with Elon Musk directly about your concerns? Does he at all ever make an appearance?
They have stonewalled the entire Senate Finance Committee repeatedly in terms of bringing us up to date, giving us documents. I had met him before he was in government, so I've met him before, but he has completely stonewalled the Senate Democrats. And by the way, this is also something else that the founding fathers would have found very, very wrong, in that we're supposed to be doing oversight, and that's our role, is conducting oversight of the laws of the United States. And if they won't give you, the executive branch won't give you any information, you can't do it.
That's right. Well, there's been a million headlines in the past few weeks about the impact that tariffs are having in Oregon on everything from big industries like semiconductors to things like cattle ranching and craft beer. As a ranking member on the Senate Finance Committee, what kinds of impacts are you seeing that everyday Oregonians might be missing?
These tariffs are poison for Oregon. We are heavily dependent on international trade. About 1 out of 4 jobs depends on international trade. The trade jobs pay better in many instances than the non-trade jobs because there's a higher value-added component. And I have been fighting these Trump taxes, because that's what they are. Tariffs are taxes. He always says foreigners are paying them, but they're Trump taxes. And I've been fighting them every day. And so often he gets up in the morning, imposes one, and then he sees the stock market and people screaming about what a bad idea it is. And we've got to take him on.
Yeah.
You know, I'm out with a new book now. It's called It Takes Chutzpah. And it's about being bold and showing grit and being willing to take on the, big odds. And most of the good stuff that's happened in America over the years has involved chutzpah and grit. And that's what I write about. And it's sure applicable when it comes to the Trump administration.
Yeah, well, is there anything Oregon businesses can do to insulate themselves from this tariff volatility?
Well, more than anything, they can speak out. There is enormous power with a bullhorn. And that's what I have been doing. That's why I mentioned the example of when I forced the Trump people to change within 24 hours the fact that they'd shut down the Medicaid portals. You just got to say, Claudia, that political change hardly ever starts in Washington, D.C. and trickles down. It's almost always the other way. It's bottoms up. So that when people are out, for example, on the healthcare and seniors issue, Social Security, if somebody is an older person, talk to somebody who belongs to AARP in another state and get it moving, get it fired up.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. When we come back, why Senator Wyden thinks it's time for you to take out your bullhorn. On March 28th, the Portland State University Center for Entrepreneurship is hosting their annual Clean Tech Challenge Finals. Now, that's PSU's premier invention competition, which gives student teams $1,000 in grant funding and then 10 weeks to develop innovative prototypes. And this year, they're also adding a brand new companion competition, the Everyday Entrepreneur, which opens up the opportunity to develop and pitch all other business ideas, no prototypes required. You can watch this all play out like our own local Shark Tank, where all 12 teams showcase their hard work and compete live for $3,000 in prizes. The winner of the Clean Tech Challenge is then invited to represent PSU at Oregon's only statewide collegiate invention competition, Invent Oregon, this June. The event is absolutely free, and cosplaying as your favorite invention of the last century is highly encouraged, no matter how many weird looks you're getting. To register, head to the link in our show notes.
This episode is sponsored by Babbel. Are you holding back on foreign travel plans this year because you're afraid of the language gap? I'm not. because I have Babbel. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I'm learning Spanish on Babbel, getting ready for a trip to Mexico City. Babbel is the language learning app that gets you talking. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks or at whatever pace you choose. Babbel's tips and tools are inspired by the real-life stuff you actually need when communicating. With a focus on conversation, you'll be ready to talk wherever you go. Babbel has given me great lessons on getting directions, ordering in a restaurant, and making plans. And of all the things I'm doing in Mexico City, I'm probably most excited about the soccer game we're going to. So I was excited to learn how to cheer from Babbel. That'll be me you'll hear yelling, "Fuerza Tigres! Fuerza Tigres!" With over 16 million subscriptions sold, Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by a 20-day money-back guarantee. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting our listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Well, we've all been reading these headlines about hundreds of thousands of federal layoffs and that another round of layoffs might be coming, even as judges are ruling that those first round of layoffs, they might be reinstated as of today, Monday morning. So what is going on? What are we doing here?
Well, I think what the Trump people are trying to do, and you see it, their layoffs in Social Security and veterans and the like, they're trying to hollow out these key kinds of programs, to reduce the number of workers, to reduce the updates in technology. I think, for example, Elon Musk has called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. Mm-hmm. I never could have imagined a high-ranking administration official calling Social Security, a Ponzi scheme. But Claudia, make no mistake about it. People who talk like that are going to be interested in privatizing Social Security. So a lot of these areas where they are trying to dismantle the role of government workers is going to come back to haunt us in terms of, pushing for things like privatization. And I will tell you that a lot of the layoffs defy common sense. For example, in the forests where we've lost people for public lands management, This is exactly the time when we need them. Because I wrote the law on prescribed burns, so you could go in there in cold weather months and reduce the buildup on the forest floor to prevent bigger fires in the summer. Right. And we need those people right now. And I've been telling the Trump people, what you're doing defies common sense. It's going to make for bigger fires in the summer.
Yeah, I know that you and fellow Senator Jeff Merkley were pushing the Trump administration to exempt seasonal firefighters from those job cuts and work freezes. Have you had any success in getting a guarantee there?
I'll be in Central Oregon tomorrow, and that'll be topic A, because I think that what they're seeing is a competition, issue. For example, I have town meetings in every county in Oregon. I've had more than 1,100 of them, most of them in rural areas. I always see help wanted signs. Those help wanted signs are for jobs that pay more than firefighters make. So we've got to get the wages up, and we've got to get their predictability and certainty so that they know how to make plans for their families up too.
This is something that I heard on TikTok, so I don't know how true this is, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, basically said, hey, even if Trump and Musk, they were to cut all the federal jobs, it's only 4% of our budget. Is that true?
Well, the reality is that there's not a program in government, not a one, that you can't work on and try to make more efficient. But we have our separation of powers. So, for example, let's take your question specifically.
Yeah.
If Donald Trump and Musk and the Speaker of the House and the leader of the Senate had decided, for example, they wanted to look at programs with the IRS, they could have called up Mike Crapo, who's now the chairman of the Finance Committee. I was previously the chair, now I'm the ranking Democrat, and say we want to have hearings. And we would have said, of course, that's what we do. You have two Democratic witnesses, you have two Republican witnesses. You try to listen to all points of view, and then you try to make a common cause kind of out of it. That's not what Trump and Musk are trying to do. Trump and Musk, and a lot of people think that Musk's real agenda here is just have fewer people and more of his products used in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the reason I bring up the 4%, because if it is true, I'm just like, well, there's your branding right there. Like, that's a number.
The biggest programs, of course, are the military
Exactly.
and Social Security,
Yeah.
Medicare and Medicaid. But I don't disagree with the argument that it's possible to make more efficient various kinds of services. What I don't believe in, and you saw it in this continuing resolution, is Trump wanted to set up slush funds and shut down the government and have a tremendous amount of power and clout to call the shots. And I know AOC well. If you look at the book that I've been talking about, she wrote a very kind blurb on the back of the book, and she's one of the young legislators who are making a big difference.
Yeah. Well, I feel like with all of these issues, there's like a million headlines coming out every day. So how can ordinary people like us, how can we keep track of all the news that's coming out of Washington, D.C. right now? Because a lot of it just feels like a distraction almost. Like it's an inundation by strategy. And then I'm afraid that there's something even bigger happening in the background that we're just not seeing.
Well, Donald Trump is the king of distraction. You know, what he always wants to do is flood the zone so that you have so much going on that people can't get on top of the most important areas. It's why the areas in the Finance Committee, like Medicaid, where you've got 1 out of 3 or 4, Oregonians depending on it for healthcare, is my priority. Trying to make sure that people aren't getting clobbered, trying to make sure that we don't lose the funds for nursing home care. Social Security is with the Finance Committee. Trade is with the Finance Committee. I try to focus on things that matter the most to Oregonians in their kitchens and their living rooms, which, by the way, I think Trump is very vulnerable. The new polls came out this morning.
Oh, yeah.
And most Americans believe he's not even keeping his promises with respect to the economy and inflation. If you'll recall, in the campaign, remember he said, I'm in a grocery store now. I want you to know your grocery prices are going to go down when I get elected president. It's one of my priorities. He blew off his promise about grocery prices and inflation about 10 days after he got elected.
Yeah, but we do have the Gulf of America, so there's that.
Oh, yes. Just exactly what nobody's talking about in my town hall meetings. I had 2 yesterday. Nobody talked about it, but everybody is talking, Claudia, about those issues where the second word is bill. It might be a medical bill, might be a rent bill, might be an education bill, might be a gas bill. And Trump promised Americans that his top priority would be holding costs down, dealing with inflation. Not only is he not holding costs down, he's bringing us all these tariffs which drive our costs up. This is a hugely important issue, Claudia. It's at the top of the list for all the things that Oregonians ask me when I'm at a Fred Meyer or at a town hall meeting or wherever we're on the streets together.
Yeah. Well, do you have any Portland town halls coming up?
Well, we had Clackamas last night. We'll have some more soon. But I just mostly want people to know that our doors are always open at wyden.senate.gov. They can get me a variety of other social media sites. And the point really is, and we touched on it, the political change starts at the grassroots. Reach out to your friends around the country. Use your bullhorn. Everybody's got a bullhorn, and everybody's got chutzpah. The big things in this country were taken on by people who had nerve and grit. I've got something in the book called Ron's Rules of Chutzpah. So if you want some guidelines on how to use yours, you can just go there.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think there's a lot of people who want to know what to do. Like, do we protest? Sometimes it feels a little like, who's listening to Portland protesting? At a certain point, we're just, especially about federal matters, we're just like, does it matter here? Should we go somewhere else and protest? Like, what do we do?
Claudia, let me give you an example of why it does matter.
Okay.
The federal government owns 53% of our land. They own most of our land. So if you live in Connecticut, it's mostly private property. People sell a piece of private property. The money gets used for various kinds of services. That's not the way it is in our state. So I mentioned, for example, the public lands issues and how we're going to take care of our forests because it's going to be another hot, fire season. The reality is when the federal government owns most of your land and it affects you in the ways that we've been talking about here on the show, don't take a pass and let somebody else pick up the place where your voice ought to be. Your voice ought to be heard, and we can't afford right now, when Trump is flooding the zone and distorting so much of what's going on, to have your listeners taking a pass.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Senator Wyden, for taking a little time and hanging out with us. And also that sweater. I just want you to know, I've been distracted this whole time because I have been looking for that sweater specifically. I'm not joking. You can't see it, but it's like a really beautiful braided green sweater. I can't find it. Where did you get it?
People have said a lot of stuff about me over the years, but I can't recall ever having somebody say I wore beautiful clothes. So
I really love that sweater.
St. Patty's is dedicated to the day I once wore a sweater that Claudia said made sense. Good day. There will be a lot of Oregonians celebrating tonight.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
To be continued. Take good care.
Well, that's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.